This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the course of the hour, we'll run through all the business news stories you need to know about from the continent and beyond. Let's start with a quick run through the markets here for you. Plenty of reading, pretty much, right across the board. Kenya's bourse, however, might be the exception, closing just about a tenth higher in today's trading session. But this comes off the back of a record-breaking first quarter performance, and all for the wrong reasons. The FTSE and NSE 25 down by at least a quarter in the first quarter of the year. The last time you had a worse performance, you've got to go back all the way to 2011. And remember, the country's top two lenders weren't spared in the rout either. Equity and KCB Bank ending the quarter 37% and 35% lower respectively. Two-day rally at the JSE also ending today. The bank index down 3.3% following downgrades from Fitch and Moody's. We'll have details on those in the course of the hour. Here's what's coming up tonight. Africa's finance ministers are seeking debt relief from the development partners. More governments turn to lockdowns in order to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. And robots made in Tunisia come in handy as the country enforces a lockdown. Let's start with fiscal support measures that the continent desperately needs. African finance ministers are seeking the International Monetary Fund, World Bank and European Union support for debt relief amidst this COVID-19 pandemic. The United Nations Economic Commission for Africa says the continent as a whole is facing what it describes as a perfect storm of an impending global economic downturn, plummeting oil and commodity prices and much weaker currencies as well. Co-chaired by South Africa's Finance Minister Tito Mboweni and Ken Ofori-Atta of Ghana, the ministers who met through a video conference asked for at least $100 billion stimulus package, and that includes, they say, a suspension of debt service payments. The ministers said the continent's development partners ought to consider debt relief and interest rate forbearance over a 2 to 3 year period for all African low and medium income countries. On to Nigeria now, the continent's largest economy. It has reported 12 new cases of COVID-19, bringing the country's total so far to 151. Millions in Lagos are staying at home following a 14-day lockdown imposed by the country's president, Muhammadu Buhari. Abuja and one other state are also observing the anti-epidemic measure. Here's CGTN's Deja Badmos with the latest from Lagos.
Nowhere painted through a picture of the level of compliance with the lockdown in this city than this area. It's called Oshodi. It's a transport hub and also has a very huge market on the side. But as you can see, the whole place looks completely deserted with the exception of a few guys who are just hanging around. Nothing is actually happening here, but at normal times, this whole area would be jammed. Now, authorities of the city are also using the opportunity that this lockdown is providing to disinfect markets across Lagos. And that's exactly what the guys over there are doing. They are disinfecting this very huge market. The hope is that when traders eventually resume, well, at least they'll be safe to do business around here. This is the central business district of Lagos. It's actually the heart of the Nigerian commercial capital, and it's just unimaginable that the whole area would be as deserted as this. The level of compliance here is, to some extent, more than 100%. Residents of this city have largely complied with the stay-at-home order, but then it's just the first day. There are still 13 more days to go, so it remains to be seen if things would continue to stay this way. If they do, then health authorities here might just be able to flatten the curve of COVID-19 in this country. Deja Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
And the situation is pretty much the same in Nigeria's federal capital territory of Abuja. The government has announced measures, as we just described, to minimize economic losses as a result of the temporary shutdown of major activities. CGTN's Phil Ihaza explains.
The curfew declared by President Muhammadu Buhari began on Monday here in Abuja and is due to last for at least 2 weeks. And now, as you can see right behind me, there are no movements of people or vehicles in sight except for a few essential workers like health officials and food vendors. Now, that's because residents have been urged to stay in their homes, postpone all travel plans and shut business activities during this period. Security operatives have since manned the streets of Abuja to ensure compliance with the directive. Opposition parties have criticized the president's declaration of a curfew, saying it may cause more hardship for many citizens who depend on daily earnings for survival. However, President Buhari has announced a series of palliative measures aimed at relieving some of the economic burden, including conditional cash transfers to the most vulnerable in the society. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
And CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam spoke to a few residents of the Federal Capital Territory. She now reports on how they're responding to this lockdown.
Crowded markets and shopping malls as residents of Abuja, Nigeria's capital, rush to stock up on food supplies and other essentials. It's in response to the 2-week city lockdown announced by President Muhammadu Buhari, a measure to curb further spread of the coronavirus. Aspects of the lockdown had commenced long before the scheduled time. Vehicular and human movement were restricted from entering into the city. All were subjected to security checks and medical screening. The move by the president has been called to query in some quarters, describing it as unconstitutional.
The legitimacy of that action is based on the provisions of the Quarantine Act, which empowers the president in times of an emergency, especially for health reasons. The president or any other health authority, including the governor of a state, has the authority to declare a disease a dangerous infected disease, has the authority to declare an area an infected area, and has the authority to take every step necessary or incidental to such actions to prevent the spread of such diseases.
There are also growing concerns on the impact of the 14-day lockdown on Nigeria's already fragile economy. Small and medium-scale businesses are the highest employers in the country, making up more than half of the country's GDP. Economists say although the lockdown is inevitable, it spells doom.
Nigeria was tilting towards another round of recession. Now, with the coming of COVID-19, then the situation is going to be terribly worse. One, many businesses will have to remain shut for the period of time COVID-19 will continue or will last. And that means there will be low income. Revenue generated by these companies will no longer be significant to take care of their needs. And we should expect that in the coming months, the size of the GDP would reduce significantly.
It's been mixed reactions from citizens here. While some welcome the lockdown, others believe government is ill prepared for it.
Even the action they are taking, I told me, my personal opinion, it's too late. They have shut down this since. So it's a good thing that government have taken a decision to close down in order to save life.
I don't think government has done enough by way of things that will help people to deal with the lockdown. So I think there wasn't enough wisdom in the way government went about it.
But in all, as the lockdown order takes effect, the compliance level is seen in deserted streets, empty malls, closed markets and businesses. It would remain so for another 13 days as authorities continue to monitor and ensure the safety of its citizens. Kelechi Mekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
On to South Africa now. The authorities there have put in place a list of relief measures that are designed to help SMEs. The government has also appealed to the private sector to assist the economy during this very difficult time. CGTN's Sumitra Naidu explains what those measures are.
This is one of the main roads that connects the Joburg city centre and some of the suburbs in the north. It's usually streaming with people, but as you can see, there's virtually no economic activity.
The Small Business Ministry has put together a $30 million package to assist.
The next facility that we are putting in place is the SMME Relief Finance Scheme. which we are going to avail it to assist SMMEs for the period of 6 months, commencing from the 1st of April 2020. The intention is that was expressed by the President for both to retain jobs and to allow a minimum business continuity and economic continuity so that the ravages on the economy are not that severe.
The minister also said that SMMEs will be eligible for assistance under the Debt Relief Fund.
We are also making that funding available at interest rate of prime less 5% to the SMMEs. We are saying the companies must be 100% owned by South African citizens, and they must employ at least 70% South African nationals. And we are going to give priority to businesses that are owned by women, youth, and people with disability. For the self-employed and the micro businesses who are not compliant, we are going to assist you to comply through the CEDA.
South Africa's richest families, the Ruperts, Oppenheimers and Motsepes, each donated over $500 million. In a televised address to the nation on Monday, the president announced further pledges.
We welcome the commitment by the Motsepe Foundation of donating 1 billion rand and by the Naspers company of also donating 1.5 billion rand to the coronavirus response. We are also extremely grateful to Mr. Jack Ma, the founder of the Chinese-based company Alibaba, who has donated vital medical supplies to South Africa and to other countries across Africa.
Government says they're still working on a package for the informal sector, which accounts for close to 3 million people. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
On to some corporate headlines. The credit ratings of South Africa's largest banks have been downgraded deeper into junk territory by Fitch Ratings and Moody's. The two agencies, of course, as you recall, have essentially cut South Africa's sovereign rating all the way into junk, most of them with a negative outlook. The move was driven by the expected negative impact from the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic on the bank's operating environment. Still in South Africa, the utility Eskom will temporarily stop the procurement of electricity from some independent power producers during the country's 21-day lockdown. Now, Eskom does supplement its generation capacity by buying power from solar and wind farms on a contract signed as part of the government's renewable energy program. However, since the lockdown started last Friday, power demand has dropped by more than 7,500 megawatts. In East Africa, Peter Ndegwa has officially taken over as the new CEO of Safaricom. Ndegwa is the first Kenyan national to run East Africa's most profitable company. He'll be taking over from the founding CEO, Michael Joseph, who's been holding the position in an acting capacity following the demise of the former CEO, Bob Connolly. And workers at Amazon-owned Whole Foods across the United States staged a mass sick-out protest on Tuesday. The move is part of a coordinated action to demand more sick pay and protections for grocery store employees who are working through the COVID-19 pandemic. Fears of contamination and risk also led to as many as 150,000 workers for grocery delivery service Instacart to execute a nationwide strike earlier on Monday. That's a run through your company headlines. You're watching Global Business Africa. Here's what's coming up shortly. Egypt imposes withdrawal limits as the coronavirus threatens a run on banks. And Somalia has reaped big from improving ties with global lenders and domestic fiscal reform.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened?
Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Naidu. Hello, Naro.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back to the program. Egypt's central bank has issued new regulations that restrict cash withdrawals across all banks. The daily cash withdrawal and deposit limits for individuals is now capped at $640 and about $3,200 for companies. The central bank is citing fears of the COVID-19 pandemic as the reason for this decision, but not everyone agrees with that viewpoint. CGTN's Adela Mahrouki explains.
The governor of the Central Bank of Egypt, Tarek Amir, says the temporary cap set over cash deposits and withdrawals is to discipline the cash flow. During the past 3 weeks, Egyptians have withdrawn nearly $2 billion from banks, an alarming figure according to Amir. CBE has also cited fears of COVID-19 infections through banks.
The central bank is concerned about the virus's spread through paper banknotes. The CBE also says this restriction would limit the flow of individuals to banks. Some are seeing it as a right decision in the wrong time. Definitely, bank clients must have been given a buffer period. The CBE was flexible to provide some exceptions, but I still don't understand the cap enforced on deposits.
On the contrary, long queues at many banks could be seen following the announcement. For individuals, a cap for deposits and withdrawals have been set to just around $640, while ATM transactions are half that amount. Corporations are restricted to only $3,200, with exceptions given to payrolls payment and check deposits.
Definitely there are unannounced reasons for the decision, one of which could be to control expected spikes in inflation. Food and nutrition products represent a significant portion of the inflation basket. These restrictions lead to limiting unnecessary buying and therefore control prices of some goods.
The Central Bank of Egypt has not announced any time frame for this cash cap. No further restrictions have been announced over non-cash transactions. The CBE's announcement follows an earlier decision to cut rates by 300 points, a move that aimed to revive the business environment in Egypt. With its cash flow restrictions, the CBE has provided stimulus to the market with one hand and took it back with the other. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
On to Tunisia now. The central bank over there plans to lower interest rates as the country tries to shield its economy from the effects this pandemic is having. CGTN's Arin Chachi filed this report from Tunis.
Tunisia's central bank governor Marwan Al-Abbasi informed the Speaker of the House of People's Representatives that the bank is working closely with financial institutions and government agencies to reduce the key interest rate again.
Reducing key interest rate again is necessary in order to stimulate economic growth. Lower financing costs can encourage borrowing and investing during this period of economic crisis. The situation could improve in the next few months. People and businesses will be tempted to invest again.
The central bank governor said Tunisia's foreign exchange reserves have exceeded $7 billion for the first time in months, covering 115 days of imports.
These reserves were at 14.5 billion dinars, around $5 billion and 85 days of import in the same period in 2019, which means an increase of 30 days of import. The energy gap has been reduced with crashing oil prices and imports plummeted.
Authorities say the new measures are aimed at guaranteeing the sustainability of businesses and to preserve jobs and citizens' purchasing power.
The impact of the coronavirus could be worse than expected. People only think of buying food. Cars and houses are not a priority for consumers. The central bank and the state in general are looking for efficient ways of reducing economic losses by encouraging consumption.
The central bank governor says the banking and financial sectors are committed to a fast and efficient implementation of the new economic measures. Prime Minister Lest Farfer had announced a series of social and economic measures costing around $900 million to protect citizens and protect the country's economy. However, some analysts and economic advisors of the Premier insist that the country will need additional resources to limit the negative impact of COVID-19. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
On to Somalia now. The country has in recent months gotten an endorsement from nearly all global financial institutions that essentially allow the country to normalize ties with the World Bank, the African Development Bank, for the first time in decades. From Mogadishu, here's CGTN's Abdulaziz Billo.
The bridge financing, worth up to $122 million, has been cleared with support from the European Union and the United Kingdom. The latest move now means that all existing arrears to the African Development Bank has been cleared, a move welcomed by Somali officials.
The African Development Bank arrears was cleared with the assistance of UK and EU. It is called bridge financing. This was a block, a debt that is unresolved, has acted as a block to our progress, to our access to grant resources. What normalcy means getting access to financial resources of the international community. That is really what it means. Today we will have projects, we will have budget support, we will have funds coming to us that will help us reconstruct this country.
The Horn of Africa nation says it has received endorsement from international creditors under the Heavily Indebted Poor Countries Initiative. Finance officials here in the country say that normalization of ties with the international money lending institution for Somalia means it will now be able to gain access to billions of dollars in grants.
Of course, poverty reduction is the element. Social sector investment is the element. Our schools and our health systems are very important. Our infrastructure is very important. Resources are always not sufficient, so we have to prioritize the priorities. But at this particular point in time, social sector and infrastructure are some of the very key priorities of this country.
Somalia's overall debt is said to be reduced from $5.2 billion to $557 million over 3 years, following recent engagement with International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Under an agreed mechanism, representatives of the Paris Club creditor countries agreed with the Somali government to restructure its external public debt following the first ever virtual negotiating meetings of the Paris Club. Recent financial reforms and a boost in domestic revenue have been attributed as some of the factors that have contributed to increased donor confidence, allowing World Bank and the European Union to offer direct investment to the federal government in efforts to boost service delivery to the public. Abdulaziz Bilo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Africa's most industrialized economy has lost its last investment-grade credit rating. The ratings agency Moody's issued the notice late on Friday night, changing its rating on South Africa to Ba1 with a negative outlook. Now, Moody's cited the country's high levels of public debt and weak growth as the key drivers for this decision. Here's CGTN's Sumitra Naidu exploring what this decision means for businesses and citizens alike.
The timing couldn't be worse. South Africa is in a recession and dealing with the spread of COVID-19. The decision by Moody's is no real surprise, though. The economy was struggling for some time.
Up to 25% of the world population right now is going through the same situation, essentially a lockdown. In terms of economically, where this leads things, the ratings review doesn't matter that much. but the risks are high that South Africa is looking at the deepest recession that the country's seen since 1985, which would be, the pre-apartheid and the apartheid years.
South Africa has now been downgraded to sub-investment grade by 3 international rating agencies. The country will be immediately removed from the World Government Bond Index. Accessing any new funding in the market will be extremely difficult for South Africa. It will also come at a higher cost.
This is still a severe piece of news because, of course, South Africa's government bonds are now going to be dropped from the world index, which means that foreign investors at some point do need to let go of those bond positions, although it is thought that initially, because of what's going on in the world trading and so on and the world markets, that this will be paused for now. But later on, of course, those government bonds will have to be dropped from foreign portfolios. Essentially, this does mean it will accelerate rand weakness and also put further pressure onto the domestic market and also the currency market. But we have to say here that, there's no tier 1 risk that is bigger than what impact this virus is going to have on the economy.
Most worrying will be the decline in foreign investment, not only because South Africa is at a higher risk now, but also because the whole world is in limbo, not knowing when the spread of COVID-19 will dissipate.
Essentially, at the same point, the world economy is looking at a recession. If this situation does persist beyond a couple of months, that will go beyond the global financial crisis of 2007. So this world economy productivity is completely at a halt. We just have to hope that there will be either a cure found or that the virus will hit a peak and life will get back to normal sooner rather than later.
It's going to be a tough road ahead for South Africans already having to deal with high unemployment, rising costs, increasing poverty, all in an economy that is not growing. Sumitra Nadu, CGT in Johannesburg, South Africa.
South Africa's Department of Agriculture has set aside a package of about $67 million to address the effects of this pandemic and ensure sustainable food output even after the pandemic is eventually over. The Agriculture Minister, Thoko Didiza, says that while several businesses will be affected, the agriculture and food sectors will remain operational during the country's 21-day lockdown. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has this report.
My fellow South Africans,
in a bid to stop the spread of the virus, President Cyril Ramaphosa announced a 21-day lockdown, but some industries have to continue to function, like the agriculture sector. Exports and imports of critical agriculture commodities and the logistical measures will continue during the lockdown period to ensure global and national food security. This will apply to the entire food value chain, from farm-related operations, agro-processing and food manufacturing, and all support functions that ensure efficient delivery of the agro-food system.
We do appreciate that there will be stresses to the different producers as well as industry generally in the production sector when it comes to the food industry. We have therefore ensured that export and import will continue, and we have advised our relevant colleagues, even in the border post, to ensure that the movement of goods should not actually be negatively impacted by this lockdown.
Live auctions of livestock and sale of other agricultural commodities will also continue, but under strict conditions. Government has put aside some money to help the farmers at this critical time.
We will put aside 100 million rands to the land bank to ensure that it cushions the farmers, particularly those who have got loans and are in distress. We have also put aside 1.2 billion to assist smallholder farmers to ensure that they continue with the production.
Food price monitoring will be conducted on critical food basket commodities, and reports will be given to the nation on a regular basis. Minister Didiza says agricultural production in all its forms will remain uncompromised. She says food security is particularly important at a critical time like this. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
It's 18:30 GMT, time for another break. Here's what's coming up shortly. China's president is calling for balance between fighting the coronavirus outbreak and restarting the economy. And we'll explore how the world's second largest film market is coping the COVID-19 pandemic.
No one again, he can hold in guns. Machine guns from police forces towards the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time?
Not at all.
Thank you very much for your time. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
Economic data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Perina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed.
And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives. News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. It's 18:32 GMT. Here's a run through some of the stories making your headlines at this hour. Coronavirus numbers continue to soar right across the world, with the United Kingdom now seeing its most deaths in one day. The United Nations is calling this pandemic humanity's worst crisis since World War II. 900 more people also died in the United States. That brings its death toll above 4,000. The number of cases surged by 24,000, approaching the 200,000 mark, the most in the world. Italy has seen the most deaths. About 12,000 have died there. Over 100,000 people are infected in Spain. It saw a record of over 816 new deaths on Wednesday. Elsewhere in the continent, South Africa's government has taken several proactive measures to combat the spread of COVID-19. Among them is the rolling out of a mass screening program. To date, over 39,000 people have been tested for this novel coronavirus. Government of Chad has deployed soldiers to Niger and Nigeria in a counter-offensive against Boko Haram, the militant group. In March, Boko Haram killed 98 soldiers during an attack on a military base in the Lake Chad region. The Chadian government has now declared the Lak province a war zone. Boko Haram launched an insurgency in 2009 in northeastern Nigeria. That insurgency later spread to neighboring Niger, Chad and Cameroon, prompting military responses from all of the countries involved. And Zimbabwe has been completing an upgrade to the country's main COVID-19 isolation center. The $500,000 upgrade was funded by the Chinese business community through the Chinese embassy in Harare. That's a run through your headlines. China's president is stressing the need to balance between fighting the COVID-19 outbreak on one hand, but also restarting economic activity on the other. He wrapped up a 4-day tour of factories and ports in one of China's largest trading hubs. Zhang Chunying reports from Zhejiang province.
This is President Xi's first trip outside Beijing since March 10th, when he inspected Wuhan, where the coronavirus outbreak began. Zhejiang province is one of the biggest national trading hubs. On the first leg of his tour, Xi visited the Transhan port area of the Ningbo Zhoushan port with a throughput that has been fully restored.
I hope the staff at the Zhoushan port could make great achievements after overcoming all the difficulties.
President Xi also said the port took the lead in resuming operation, which is important in restoring the logistics system and global industrial chains. He called for efforts to cope with global restrictive measures on cargo shipping and to facilitate trade. He said the Zhoushan port plays an important role in initiatives such as the Belt and Road, the Yangtze River Economic Belt and integration of the Yangtze River Delta. He also visited an industrial park that produces high-end auto parts and the modes in Ningbo. The president inspected a private manufacturer, where he stressed the government's support for smaller companies. President Xi also visited a village where he stressed ecological protection and met some residents. And the president inspected the wetland conservation and the technology-based urban management system in the provincial capital, Hangzhou. Zhang Chunying, CGTN.
China has lifted limitations on foreign ownership of securities and fund management companies. Now, the world's second largest economy has been accelerating the pace at which it's opening up its financial sector as it fights slowing growth at home. With the details, here's CGTN's Guan Xin.
Starting from Wednesday, China has scrapped limits on foreign ownership of securities companies, opening up its trillion-dollar securities market to foreign investment. The Chinese Securities Regulatory Commission says that eligible foreign investors can file applications for the establishment or change of the actual controller of securities firms in accordance with related laws and regulations. Foreign investors welcome the move.
Of course, this is a very good news for the world because we are in a process of disintegration, deglobalization, which is being speeded up by the coronavirus and which started well before even the trade war. So any measure to open up any country, especially China, to the rest of the world is absolutely welcome.
Several foreign securities companies, including UBS, Nomura Holdings, and JP Morgan, have won approval from Chinese financial authorities to take majority stakes in local securities ventures. As of 2019, overseas investments accounted for 2% of China's stock market and 2.9% of China's bond market. There's still big potential to grow.
China is very big, its financial markets are growing very fast, and they deserve the fair share they should have in the global financial sector, which means that foreign securities companies will be interested in accessing underlying Chinese assets to then sell to their clients overseas.
China's domestic securities companies would face more foreign competition in the short term, but an expert says it will be beneficial for the industry in the long run.
The local market and the industry would also gain a lot from their participation. For instance, the market could become more internationalized since the broker-dealers would bring their foreign capitals and the clients. And the market would become more diversified in terms of trading parties, trading styles, and trading tools. And finally, the local investors would have more alternatives in the financial services.
China has sent a strong signal to the world that it is fully committed to further opening up. Meanwhile, it also provides an opportunity for foreign companies to diversify their portfolios amid the recent turmoil of global financial markets. Guan Xin, CGTN.
New Zealand has imposed a complete lockdown to stop the spread of COVID-19. The lockdown is expected to run for at least a month. Residents have been ordered to stay in their homes unless they're buying groceries or seeking medical help. From the 1st of April, New Zealand has confirmed at least 708 cases. CGTN's Owen Poland reports from Auckland.
It's the dream holiday, cruising around New Zealand in splendid isolation. But in the locked-down world of COVID-19, that dream has become a potential nightmare of self-isolation in a car park full of motorhomes.
Anyone entering New Zealand during the current 4-week lockdown is being sent into quarantine for at least 2 weeks. And this is where some of them could be staying, in campervan parks that have been set up in the major cities of Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch.
Empty hotels are being used to quarantine thousands of people, but the Ministry of Health says it needs the camper vans on standby to isolate potential COVID victims.
We will get as much accommodation as we need to make sure we can keep people safe, both those people coming in and also other New Zealanders.
Why are these self-contained motorhomes such a good option for self-isolation?
Grant Webster runs New Zealand's largest tourism company, which includes global brands like Brits and Maui, and he told me that camper vans have helped in other international emergencies.
We do a number of different sort of emergency services responses around the world for different issues, whether it be fires in California or hurricanes in Florida. We've helped out in different ways.
Fitted with kitchens and bathrooms, the self-contained motorhomes are an ideal home away from home, and their mobility helps in emergencies.
We can be mobilised to form a new accommodation centre in a different location very easily, locations where there may not be hotels or motels.
But the COVID lockdown means that once camper vans reach their destination, they can't be driven anywhere for the next month.
We have, for example, tourists who think it's okay to drive around the country in their camper vans. It's not okay. Stay absolutely put. Stay in place.
Essential workers like doctors and nurses are also starting to use camper vans to isolate themselves from their families, which is good news for the hire companies.
In this time when our traditional revenue's zero, we're certainly keen to be able to use our products wherever else to help out wherever we can.
And health officials are counting on China's experience with COVID-19 to plan for the future.
We're also looking to countries like China to see, as they come out of what appears to be a successful lockdown arrangement, what things they put in place to prevent getting a further increase again.
The camper vans will be decontaminated for any trace of the virus, and hopefully, before long, they'll get back on the road in search of a new adventure. Owen Poland, CGTN, Auckland.
Now, in some respects, you could argue that no industry is being damaged as rapidly or as widely by the COVID-19 pandemic as the entertainment sector, except maybe tourism and travel. But analysts estimate that this pandemic has already cost the global box office as much as $5 billion so far this year. CGTN's Chen Tong examines how the world's second largest film market has been affected.
Producers of The Winners, a comedy which was scheduled to premiere in cinemas at the end of February, haven't been able to wait. They've sold the distribution rights to short video app Douyin, which is offering it to users for free. The production team has not revealed the sales price, but when Douyin bought the rights to Lost in Russia, they paid 630 million yuan for it. Industry experts say these deals are aimed at solving the producers' cash problems.
It's obvious that there are many movies that cannot debut in cinemas, and they're suffering from the pressure of production costs. If they cannot premiere, people may forget about them, and that cuts the box office earnings. So there are a lot of medium and low-cost movies that are going to be debuting on the internet.
In the business model of a cinema film, producers share their box office earnings with the cinemas and investors. How much they can earn depends on how many people buy tickets. But turning to free online debuts as a business model reduces producers' risks. The internet firms pay the producers a flat fee for the copyright and then make money themselves by drawing in more viewers.
The model has become business to business, just like the internet dramas. Streaming websites buy the movies, and whether the movies are good or not is no longer a major concern of the production team. It actually helps the production team to control their risks.
With these movies being pushed to debut online because of the pandemic, the question now is whether this will change the viewing behavior of the Chinese audience. The answer will probably be no. We talked to some people in Shanghai and they still preferred going out to the movies.
The visual and audio experience is still better in cinemas. Watching a movie on a mobile phone at home is just like watching a pirate film. The whole feeling is different.
Couple just won't feel the same if they watch a movie at home.
When you go out to the movies, you can have a stroll and enjoy yourself.
It has been more than 2 months since the cinemas were shut because of the pandemic. It's still unclear when they will reopen. Aside from the moviegoers, the people most concerned about that are the movie producers anxious to get their cash back. Chen Tong ICS for CGTN, Shanghai.
Quick run to commodity prices here for you. Brent crude continuing its decline today, down about 4.2% at 14.18 GMT, much lower earlier on in the trading session. Bloomberg is reporting that Saudi Arabia still is adding supply to the market, the cratering of demand notwithstanding. Supplies rose to 12 million barrels a day at the start of April. Now, as more and more countries around the world impose lockdowns or curfews of some sort, energy demand is still being hollowed out at an accelerated pace. Platinum slightly positive in trading today, but it's still fallen by at least a quarter on a year-to-date basis. Coffee, 1.46% lower today, only 10% lower in the quarter. That's holding up a little better than some might have expected. Here's what's coming up next. Robots made in Tunisia come in pretty handy as the country is trying to enforce a lockdown.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back. For the last 4 years, the Startup Academy in Nigeria has been training entrepreneurs on how to build sustainable and scalable businesses. And beyond structural support and business education, this academy has also been helping them to access government loans in order to expand their enterprises. CGTN's Deji Banwas has the details on grassroots tonight.
A typical session for young entrepreneurs underway at the Itsinia Startup Academy. They're taking through all the rudiments of starting a business and sustaining it. Short for It's in You, Itsinia Startup Academy trains about 10 entrepreneurs at a time, 4 times a year, fortifying them with all they need to be successful. Founded by a Swede and franchised in Nigeria in 2016, Itsinia is a backbone for quite a number of startups in Nigeria, helping them to develop and grow their business.
People had good ideas, but they had very bad structures or foundations. And we felt with the proper coaching and training, we would have better businesses that would have the right foundation to grow.
Ngak says Itsinia was essentially founded to fix the projection that 70% of businesses are bound to fail. So they've been providing entrepreneurship education to business founders in Nigeria, introducing them to an ecosystem of other innovative minds with access to business development experts and coaches. But beyond providing help for business structures, Itinia also teaches entrepreneurs how to access the Central Bank of Nigeria's loans to enable them scale.
The CBN is partnering with Itinia through the Nisal Microfinance Bank to train entrepreneurs who are planning to get loan from the microfinance bank to grow their SMEs. Itinia gives them foundational training to help them understand how to use these loans and what to use them for, and also to help them build capacity that would enable them pay back the loan to the bank.
You can never have...
Zachary Fakiro is a fish farmer. He's been at Itinia Startup Academy for about 3 months now. He says with all he's learnt here, he's ready to hit the ground running.
I know exactly what to do from 1 naira to 50 million naira now with what I've learned here. So basically, I'm ready. Once I get the loan, I will know how to apply what and how to get to the last and also get results and also pay back.
In the past 4 years, Itinia has trained over 180 entrepreneurs, mainly from the north of the country. They're aiming to help even more by building a larger hub to include incubator, accelerator and business support services. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
And back to Tunisia. In the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic and the explosion in demand for surgical masks, a fashion designer in the North African state has turned her atelier into a workshop to produce these surgical face masks. Here, around 2,000 medical masks are dispatched daily to hospitals that need them. CGTN's Alexandria Majala has more.
Kalaoud Gosmi has been a fashion designer for years. Her small atelier is based in Tunis, Tunisia's capital. After the COVID-19 pandemic hit, the North African nation was hit by a shortage of face masks. It was then that the designer decided to take a break from the fashion world to produce hundreds of face masks.
Because of the spread of the coronavirus, face masks are not available at pharmacies. I thought I can use my atelier to produce these masks at the same time by utilizing my biology degree in order to make these masks available in pharmacies and hospitals.
Gosmi's masks are made from durable fabric and are reusable. She dispatches the products daily to hospitals and pharmacies struggling to match demand. She started making the masks very recently and financed the project herself.
This is an example of the face masks we produce. We use non-woven fabric to make them. As you can see, there are 2 layers so that the masks are more effective. The material itself is breathable as it has small openings and an internal layer functioning as a protective shield. This is more effective than the masks sold at pharmacies because the latter is used once, then discarded. We can wash this mask and reuse it.
Different organizations have already caught wind of the social enterprise and pitched in to fund the small workshop of 30 tailors. So far, she has distributed 8,000 masks. Her workshop churns out between 1,000 to 1,500 masks every day. The goal is to produce more than 10,000 masks in upcoming weeks. Tunisia, which suffers from limited health infrastructure, is fighting to contain the outbreak after it said it had over 275 cases and 8 deaths. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
And still in the country, Innova Robotics is the first company in Africa and the Middle East and North Africa region, really, that builds its own robots. The Tunisian startup specializes in developing mechanical systems that can autonomously navigate the environment they're in. And authorities in Tunisia have now deployed these very robots to enforce the country's lockdown and help prevent the spread of COVID-19.
Pearl Guard's robot is patrolling in the capital city Tunis. This scene has become familiar since the beginning of the general lockdown and the coronavirus outbreak in Tunisia.
What are you doing here? Show me your ID. Are you aware of the general lockdown measures? You must respect the rules and go home.
The robot is a four-wheel drive mobile base powered by electric motors and batteries, allowing it to patrol for up to 8 hours in the governorate of the Greater Tunis district.
Tunisia is fighting a deadly virus and disease. The Commission of Security and Defense at Parliament approves the use of robot and the latest technology to protect citizens and security agents from COVID-19.
Citizens are proud of this made in Tunisia robot. The machine can ask questions and interact with the public.
Without the coronavirus crisis, the robot would never have been used. The authorities seized the opportunity for public interest. I respect the robot like any police agent.
This is a good initiative. We hope the technology and robots will also be used in the health sector and the administration to limit direct contact and stop this contamination.
A remote interface is provided with Pearl Guard. It allows policemen to manually control the robot remotely from the central command unit at the Interior Ministry or any police station or patrol across the country. Innova Robotics has developed a new machine which is dedicated to healthcare. The system was built for elderly people to keep social contact with their families. The updated version will be used at hospitals to communicate with patients infected with coronavirus. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
All right, then a quick run through the currencies as we wrap up the program. Most of the currencies we track here were all in the negative yet again today. The rand, for instance, continuing its decline against American dollar, down at least 3.25 at 14.27 GMT. 17.96 was the number at that point in time. Kenyan shilling down 0.27%, 105.05. The naira also continuing that slide against American dollar. It did go as low as 4.6 to the dollar today. Jack Nell over at Oxford Economics estimates, in fact, that this pandemic won't just shave at least 100 basis points off continental growth this year, but preliminary estimates, he says, point towards the weakest growth in Africa since the early 1990s. And on that sobering note, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. As always, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the content you've seen on the program in the last hour. There are many ways to get your thoughts back to us. All of them are on your screens right now. I'm Ramah Nyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Thank you for watching and for your company in the last hour.